Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're live and we're going to talk about watches. This is your host, Young Brando from Los Angeles, and we'll get right into it. Um, I'm going to mainly talk about some new releases tonight. As always, you guys know I will start with a quick warm up, so to speak. Talking about some of the historical and horological material that I have unearthed and wrote about on my Instagram. So let's get right into it. I've been on a football related kick recently, football and Formula One, you might say. So this is what we have done. Um, I think we have looked at some of these before, but no matter, this is well deserving of repeat. The Belgian Grand Prix, of course, if you have started watching Formula One in the 90s, at least in a throwback way, is very important because this is where Michael Schumacher made his Formula One debut, where he was actually filling in for a driver who was at the time in prison. Um, that was for Jordan GP, and he was very quickly poached by the famous or infamous Flavio Briatore for the Benetton Formula One team, and the rest, as they say, is history. Pardon me. And here he's getting ready to race with his manager, who over time managed many other German drivers and others as well. Willy Weber, and he has this classic style of wearing a Western shirt, aviators, and usually polishing it off with a nice timepiece. And here he's wearing the classic 5-digit version of the Rolex Explorer 2 with the black dial, no fuss, no muss. Beautiful piece, 16570 with the black dial. These things kind of oscillate. I think over time, the polar white dial has really claimed its position of primacy among these two options. Not necessarily because it's objectively better. I mean, to my taste, it is, but probably because it offers something original that doesn't really exist elsewhere in the Rolex professional line. Whereas, of course, a black dial Rolex is absolutely classic and instantly recognizable. So that can make your choice for you if you are really between those two options, right? Do you want something that is a little bit off the beaten path, um, as a Rolex can be? Of course, there are limits to that. It's predictable, but it does the job and it does it really well. Or you want your Rolex to be a Rolex with, of course, the additional 24-hour indication, of course, with the newer movements, and especially with the new generation, which has an enlarged case now. Um, this is essentially a so-called GMT watch, right, where you can, in fact, set the local time with 1 hour increments of the hour hand, where you have not only 24-hour indication, but an indication of a second time zone with the help of the fixed bezel, which has this kind of sunburst finish that radiates outside, which is kind of cool. It's one of those only watches that still remain in the Rolex catalog that still oozes with that utilitarian quality. I like it. I have one with the white dial. You probably have seen it before. It's one of my favorites. So it's always cool to see historical instances of people really wearing this watch. This was a little bit out of the blue. Someone contacted me and said, like, can you identify what he's wearing? And it kind of has this futuristic quality, of course, because essentially it looks like a smaller Apple Watch, although it really doesn't belong to the time period, which is not ancient history, right? This is from 2003, and the two people in question are Frédéric Malle, who is a famous editor of fragrances, creator of fragrances, who has more of an artistic vision, working in conjunction with an actual perfumer, and his son. This is the two of them at their Paris home in 2003, and he wears the Echipod or iPod Manatee chronometer, which incidentally is also a world time watch, right, where you have this central dial that completes a full revolution once in every 24 hours, and the 24-hour outer periphery that surrounds that, which serves to display 24 time zones at once. It's a pretty cool watch. Came in a few different dial colors, including this yellow, red, blue, kind of a tuxedo look with a white dial with a black center. And I think they also had a more limited edition that was in 3 different shades of gold with kind of complementary gold toned, or rather gold patterned dials for these. And Mark Newson, of course, the creative mind behind the brand, is an industrial designer who has obviously with this brand, with his brand, designed watches before, although he has not been associated with the brand since 2012. He has also been involved in the design of the Apple Watch, and here with the rubber band that's integrated into the rectangular form of the case, you can kind of see some of the ideas that have almost a direct line of connection to the sportier versions of the Apple Watch. It's quite an interesting piece, and I'm not surprised to see it on his wrist. Kind of an off-the-wall choice, but somehow it makes sense. This is Willy Weber as well, again at Spa, and this time wearing a much less humble watch. This was, I think, for the time, quite a boss choice, and it's no wonder, because at the end of the day, this is 1996, again at the Belgian Grand Prix at the Spa. However, this was the first season of Schumacher at Ferrari, so they had stepped up quite a bit with already 2 World Drivers' Championships under his belt. Obviously, Schumacher made a lot of money, and so did his manager, and he is wearing here an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar, I believe in stainless steel, so that would be 25654 ST, and it's really a beautiful piece, mostly because for all the complication, for all the original striking brutalist design, it's still a deeply monochromatic watch that takes full advantage of that interplay between brush grained and high polished surfaces, down to the choice of the dial, right, which is like a matte silver with something of a grainy texture, and then you have these shiny calendrical counters that basically replicate the interplay between the brushed and polished surfaces on the octagonal bezel, on the case, and on the bracelet. And that's, pardon me, pretty much one of the most enchanting aspects of Gérard Genta's original Royal Oak design. And this is also a model before the introduction of the leap year indication, right? Leap year indicator on Royal Oak perpetual calendars. That comes into the picture with 25820, the reference number. From a technical standpoint, you might say it's a drawback. From an aesthetic standpoint, I think it makes up for that quote-unquote disadvantage quite handily, because it is such a balanced design, right? Almost kind of like four subdials, so to speak, the three calendrical indicators and the moon phase indicator at 6 o'clock. And you have heat blued hands for the calendar subdials, and a deeper shade of blue, of course, for the night sky that goes with the moon phase indicator. So everything, I think, plays beautifully with each other. Everything hangs together. Since we're talking about the German, that's a beautiful German word. They use sometimes, Zusammenhang is a context, right? Where everything kind of hangs together in a coherent manner. So this is a watch where everything hangs together. John Mayer, who has since become a creative conduit for the brand, which is an interesting and heretofore unseen title. But it means basically he designs a lot of watches for them. By the way, I dropped the link to my Instagram as well. Feel free to follow these pieces that I'm discussing there. Feel free to drop a like, drop a comment if you like. I know some people who listen to this channel love to stay in hiding. That's great. But feel free to also show your appreciation in any way you wish. And the least one can do, of course, if you are being educated here, is to hit the like button here on YouTube, there on Instagram, in any way you wish. This was, I'm not sure if it was quite the inauguration of the space when the AP House opened on Sunset in Los Angeles. It was at the time the second such establishment in the US, and the 15th, I believe, AP House at the time. Now there are more than 24, I think 25 of them. And it also served as a kind of farewell party to the then outgoing CEO, François-Henri Benamias. And John Mayer presented him with a one-of-a-kind version of his PRS signature guitar, John Mayer Silver Sky. And as you see, it actually has the initials for the brand AP as part of its mother of pearl inlays on the fretboard. And the piece is by now also a fixture in that space, right? So it's the guitar that he gifted is still there. So if you ever make it there, feel free to take a tour and see those sites. And at that time, this was a relatively new release, a new 37 millimeter Royal Oak, entirely executed in 18 karat yellow gold with turquoise stone dial. That's what John Mayer is wearing. It's a variation of the 15550 BA. It's still quite rare. I think it's rather difficult to get an allocation of this watch unless you are at that level of relationship, or unless you're an ambassador. In fact, in real life or public photos, the only two people that I have seen this watch on their wrist is John Mayer and Arina Sabalenka, both of whom have, of course, direct relationships to the brand. I think this is Ginny Wright, who is the CEO of AP in the US. So that's the kind of company you see in that picture. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not an expert on guitars at all, a Martin acoustic guitar as well. Variation on that theme, we are looking at two APs. This is from a little while ago, when Internazionale actually won the 2024 edition of the Italian Super Cup. Last year's was actually won by AC Milan. I don't know if it's still happening in Saudi Arabia, but for those two editions, certainly it did, with 4 Italian teams traveling to Riyadh and playing the games there. Here is Marcus Thuram, who happens to be, by the way, also the son of French legend, right back of a World Cup winning team himself, Lilian Thuram. Marcus is a forward of the Inter setup, and here on his way to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, he's wearing the 15407 ST, and on his way back with the Super Cup at hand, he's wearing the pink gold version, so 15407 OR. This is the famous double balance open worked, which is still in catalog, but not in these two variations. Both the stainless steel and pink gold versions are now discontinued. Which I think is a shame, and I wonder if they are going to make a comeback at all, or if they will be followed by some other version of their open worked. Obviously, there's the jumbo open worked, which is 16204, which doesn't have the doubling of the balance wheel and balance spring, of course, which serves a regulative function, a chronometric function, so to speak. Last but not least, this is young Pep Guardiola in Rome at a press conference ahead of the 2009 final. This was his very first year of managing at the senior level, at the highest level, and he did something that was rarely achieved then, and only repeated by a handful of others, including himself, by the way, later in Manchester City as well. A continental treble, so to speak, at the highest level. So the league championship, the cup title, the domestic cup title, and also the Champions League winners. That was Barcelona. You guys can already feel that I don't like saying that. Barcelona is by far one of my favorite teams. It's really not. But when you see greatness, you have to recognize it as it is, and Guardiola has been that ever since the beginning of his career at this level. And he was a great defensive midfielder to boot, by the way. He was part of Johan Cruyff's Barcelona dream team himself, which for the first time brought Barcelona that sort of glory in 1992. I think that's when they won what was then called the European Cup. Here in Rome, Guardiola is wearing Pasha de Cartier, the Sea Timer version. In this case, it's stainless steel with a black dial and with a stainless steel bracelet that's rubber coated, which is an interesting choice, interesting juxtaposition, especially for a jewelry brand. But I don't know. It somehow works. It's not something that they have gone back. If they will do anything like it again, it would probably involve some sort of vanilla scented rubber bracelet that fits this configuration rather than a rubber coated or rubber clad one. But it's a great piece, especially for the time. And I think the cabochon they have in this case, which is black ceramic rather than an artificial sapphire. Very cool piece that I didn't expect to find, honestly, while I was digging deep into this rabbit hole. All right, please hit the like button. Now we're starting in earnest. The first release that I want to talk about is actually the new Atelier Wen watch. This is the Ancestra Jiao, I believe. Obviously, not knowing any Chinese, I'm probably butchering that word, but here is a look at the watch, which I think in many ways both builds on the kind of handwork intensive and artistic aspects of some of their earlier pieces, some of what they displayed previously, especially in their sports watch. It also continues this whole story of focusing or front-loading, really, Chinese craftsmanship with the French identity and background of its founders. So it is, in fact, taking a Chinese-made piece that is powered with a French movement that is by Pekinier, and it also has two variations, both of which follow the similar lines, except one features the stylized Arabic numerals alternating with baguette cut diamonds, whereas there's also a version that has Chinese characters instead of these Arabic numerals, and you have a dial that is hand hammered and finished in enamel for the color, so it's quite striking. I also like the periphery, which has this Grecian key design, which is not particularly French or Chinese, I think, but I wonder how they have come up with that particular decision. I'm sure somewhere, somehow in their material, they actually explain it. Not sure if I will get into that, because it is actually quite peripheral to the story here. Of course, the previous Perception sports watch had the hand guilloche dials. What we have here is something that is more along the lines of classic dress watch. Again, rendered in stainless steel for the first time for Atelier when it actually has a full exhibition case back, 38 millimeters in diameter, which seems like a kind of Goldilocks spot for a dress watch. 11.3 millimeters of thickness, not exactly not exactly how should I put it, ultra thin dress watch, but also not excessively thick either. And I think that thickness includes the domed sapphire crystal, so it's not an artificial number. It actually fits the reality of the watch and how it would wear on the wrist. You guys know I always like these kinds of bolder shoulder designs, lug designs that have this kind of distinctive shoulder, so to speak. So I was happy to see that for the case. And it's so they start to speak of the dial. They start with sterling silver base, and they hand hammer it according to a craft that would be in French called martelage. And then they use layers of enamel to achieve this particular gradient blue finish of the dial. It really is more like a silvery center that has shades of aquatic blue, and that finishes towards the edges of the dial in a much more deeper shade. And apparently the dials are all fired about half a dozen times. And after that process is complete, they're sanded down and polished to obtain that flat, glossy finish. So it's a Grand Feu enamel dial that is made in China, made in an enamel facility in China. They declare that the rejection rate, was 50%. So you guys know that sort of making certain kinds of enamel dials are pretty difficult due to that rejection rate, and that's why the cost can be quite high, especially when you are looking for a watch like that from a more recognized luxury brand. Here, of course, you have a watch that's perhaps more expensive than anything else that the brand has offered previously. That being said, I think there's a lot of value on this watch that if you are taken by its aesthetics, it might be worth taking a look at it. Because again, there's a lot of quality on the dial, obviously a lot of handwork that you don't often see, right? That sort of hand hammering in related forms, maybe not exactly in this way, but it has been used by Moritz Grossmann, of course, and in limited editions also by Lange, for example, right? You don't even find these sorts of hand hammered dials at this point in most um, luxury brands. Um, just as an example, the so-called Florentine dial that AP has reintroduced in the white gold version um, of the Royal Oak Jumbo, the 16202 BC. That certainly is not a hand hammered dial anymore. Um, you'll recognize it very quickly when you put an example of a classic Audemars Piguet Tuscan or Florentine dial next to this new version, right? It certainly looks every bit of the kind of um, machine or CNC guided technique now than it does of handwork. So for a watch that's when everything is said and done, Atelier when is selling at 5850, right? And that's all the taxes, dues, and potential tariffs included. That's what the website declares at any rate. It seems like an interesting bargain. Again, they're taking advantage of the kind of crafts and facilities that are already available in China. And of course, they're leveraging the considerably cheaper labor costs, right? And that's how they can have uh, those baguette cut diamonds set quite nicely on the dial as well, because obviously diamond setting in China is much cheaper than what it would cost in a Western country, whether we are talking about France, Switzerland, or the United States. I believe the first 88, I want to say, I'll pull up that. Um, I'll pull up that detail very quickly. I think the first 88 examples of the watch had a special handmade strap that will be available for purchase. Right, there was like a suede blue strap for the first 88 pieces. So to speak about the movement a little bit, this is the Chinese characters rather than Arabic, which is a little bit different, right? Because in the Arabic numeral version of the dial, there's 12 at 12 o'clock, whereas here the sequence of the characters and baguette cut diamonds changes. Let's take a look at the movement. Oh, these are the lugs, by the way, which I think, again, the case is seemingly beautifully finished. I'd love to see one in person, obviously, but until then, I think the crown itself has an embossed pattern that's filled in with blue lacquer, so that's a nice detail as well, and that's the brand's symbol. Very nice buckle as well that has unique details and a beautiful contrasting finish too. Here's the movement, which is made by Pékinier. It's a customized version of the Pékinier EPM 03, micro-etched on the bridge with an excerpt from a 2 millennia old Chinese poem. And apparently its ratchet return wheel and balance bridge has also been worked with an end-to-end black polishing. The open-work rotor is made out of tungsten, but it is pink gold plated. And it's actually not a bad movement with 65 hours of minimum power reserve and chronometer level accuracy, although I don't think the watch actually comes with any particular kind of chronometer certification. Again, the standard strap is a cream colored textured leather strap that's similar to Hermès's Epsom. And there is, for the first 88 orders, complimentary lambskin suede strap in blue, which I think is also available for purchase for about $270 US. Here's their own page right here for the Ancestra. I can actually drop the link right there. Feel free to hit the like button. I would really appreciate that. For a small channel like this, again, it matters a great deal. That one like can make all the difference for me. So please feel free. And again, if it's not quite the tremblage you see in Moritz Grossmann or Lange limited edition dials, it's quite a striking hand-hammered dial that's finished with a very variegated grand feu enamel color. I think the baguette cut diamonds are set quite beautifully too. Of course, not with a fully invisible setting or anything, but not in a way that detracts from the aesthetics of that dial, right? Don't expect to see Rolex level baguette cut diamonds on this, both in terms of their quality, I'm sure, but also their setting. But it's not like there are any visible imperfections either. Here's again the Chinese version of the dial. Again, having handled various editions of the Perception, for my part, I can speak quite highly of the product they're offering. I think it's their watches feel exactly like that price point, right? The Perception does feel like a $3,000 watch, which I can't necessarily say about a number of Swiss brands. Honestly, what they give you at that price point can feel significantly cheaper. Alec JVK looks nice. Any favorite finishes? Have you heard of charbonnage? Yeah, I've heard of charbonnage mostly through the work of Theo Offray. I'm sure you know who he is. He uses that sort of finishing on his movements usually. Um, on the bridges of the movements, it was highly prominent as a signature on the bridges of their collaboration with Peter Mambeda, for instance. Um, yeah, it depends if you're asking for dial or movement finishing. I guess when it comes to dials, at the end of the day, I think actual hand guilloche usually is the most pleasant to me. Um, I like enamel dials in any other color than white. White is a little too stately for me, but the kind of um, that deep, almost wet quality, liquid quality of a of an enamel dial really captivates me. I I like Stella dials, right? You know, the old school lacquered dials by Rolex. Um, I like their matte dials. I don't know. I like their gilt dials. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to involve, how shall I put it, necessarily an artistic craft to pull me in, right? You know, it's especially with vintage watches, it's about the character of that particular um, piece. But yeah, charbonnage is certainly an interesting uh, technique, especially when it comes to its revival by people like Offray, because I don't think again they use that technique very widely in modern watchmaking. Apparently, it's literally the word charbon, of course, comes from there. It's literally a piece of charcoal that's used in a soft way, right? You know, it's kind of more artistic version, you might say, of perlage. I know that takes away from its specialty, but I mean quite the opposite. Actually, it's I think it's a uh, very beautiful way because it has that quality of randomness, arbitrariness that, of course, perlage finishes don't uh, have. Um, Now, rather than talking like that, I want to bring up, of course, what we were just talking about with the perlage finish. And I think it's really good to look at this particular detail. Thank you, man. I appreciate you too. Thank you. It's it's a combination of knowledge, insight, and mostly passion. Honestly, the only reason I know about these things is because I live and breathe it. Right? You know, there's hardly a minute of the day where I don't think about watches. You know, and if I'm not, it's probably soccer. Right? If I'm not thinking about watches, it will be about some sort of sports. Um, or sex, but that's private, so let's not get into that detail. But this is the Zenit caliber 135 that Peter Mambeda and Offray worked on for their submission to the Only Watch charity auction, to the most recent edition of it, and to my knowledge, that will be the last one ever. But of course, the base plate of the movement is finished with classic perlage, of course. And you can see the charbonnage finish on the bridges of that movement. Nice deep anglage on its edges as well. So yeah, I do like charbonnage. So that was the Ancestra by Atelier Wen, Ancestra Jiao. It's the launch edition, the limited edition. I think it's going to be available for pre-order for about another week. The expected delivery apparently is in the second quarter of 2026, so it's quite far away. And I know they are experiencing some delays with their delivery of the Miasim, the last edition of the Perception that they shared last year. So it's normal that they are going to make you wait a little longer for this, but the piece again is only going to be on order for a limited time. That they call this the launch edition probably means that it's going to come back in one shape or form again, but perhaps not at this level, not at this level of aesthetic flourish, perhaps. So it might, in fact, be best that one takes advantage of it if you like it. Of course, I know a lot of brands, a lot of Kickstarter brands, micro brands, emergent brands have taken advantage of this sort of drop style product releases, and it does work for them. So I can't really blame them once again. On the other hand, yes, if you like it, and if you like this particular version of it, chances are it's not coming back in that same configuration, and it's probably best that you get it sooner than later. But of course, they are working with an order window at this point, right? Not with a limited number of pieces. The next watch that we are going to talk about is a version of Blancpain 50 Fathoms, the Tech series, the reference 5029. I'm going to take a very quick break, very short break, and then I will come back. Alec, if you need to go, I might have to answer your questions later on. And again, I'm a very small channel, so if you submit those questions for future reference with a super chat, that would be much appreciated. I will be back in 2 minutes. All right, I'm back. And the camera is on too. We're talking about the Blancpain Tech 5029. This is not an altogether new release, because I think last year, or perhaps already 2 years ago, they have released this limited edition Tech Gombessa, which had an additional fourth hand and a unique 3-hour timing bezel, specifically designed for technical diving specifications. That was part of their 70th anniversary of 50 Fathoms. And last year, they also had a limited Ocean Commitment number 4 edition, which took that same case design and used it with a more traditional 3-hander plus dates kind of format. That was a 100-piece limited edition. So essentially, the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Tech, the current version, the new release, takes that most recent limited edition that was released earlier this year and integrates that into Blancpain's catalog as a standard production offering. And other than that, it's pretty much a new colorway, right, where you have orange accents instead of the blue, which was the case with the Ocean Commitment. And there's the Tech signature that appears on the lower half of the dial. So the aesthetics of this watch essentially is not unlike the Planet Ocean Ultra Deep from Omega, or kind of a deep sea dweller from Rolex. However, that's where the similarities end, because on the one hand, yes, this does look every bit of a chunky diving watch that has highly tech specifications, but actually this version of the 50 Fathoms doesn't really differ much from other 50 Fathoms pieces in Blancpain's lineup, because despite its dimensions and despite that rather protruding helium escape valve that it features on the case at around 10 o'clock, it has 300 meters of depth rating. And again, that is already quite superfluous for the use that it will receive from 99.9% of the people who might actually buy this watch. But that being said, it kind of leaves something to be desired, especially for a watch that looks like this and that wears this big. Also, unlike that Ocean Commitment, you can see here it's presented with 3 different colors in terms of strap options. It has a quick release system, as you can see here. That's what's different from the limited edition, and it's a welcome change, I think. Other than that, it has all the beautiful things I think that set apart the 50 fathoms from similar pieces, similar models that it competes against. This fully illuminated um, sapphire bezel for rotational dive timing. Of course, the quality of the luminous hour markers here with the oversized Arabics at the quarters. It's quite cool as well. I mean, it looks like a great watch actually if you like oversized dive watches, honestly, and it's not, um, from other technical aspects like its movement. It's actually quite capable. It's a 4 hertz Blancpain caliber 1315A, which has roughly 5 hours of power reserve thanks to its triple barrel design. It is priced at 22,700 US dollars, which again is not, I think, not unexpected. Let's put it like this, from Blancpain. That's more or less um, their price point for some of their uh, supposedly technically advanced offerings. Again, you get the aesthetics of a deep sea diver here, 45 millimeters in diameter, 14.2 millimeters in thickness. Those are the case dimensions. You do get high grade titanium, although the case is predominantly brushed in terms of its finish, so um, it's not really that marvelous when you think of it. Beyond, of course, its lightweight feeling in in conjunction in combination with its dimensions. But yeah, I'm somehow puzzled by the fact that it's still only rated at 300. Um, Again, those numbers are simply in reference to certain achievements in engineering more than anything, and they're not necessarily put to use, right? But you do need, for example, at least 30 millimeters of a so-called depth rating to feel at ease when you're washing your hands with your watch, right? I wouldn't tackle the dishes after dinner if my watch didn't at least have 100 meters of depth rating, right? I wouldn't take a watch to the sea or even uh, to the pool, to the gym, if it didn't at least have uh, 200 meters of a depth rating. So you see where I'm going with this, right? I wouldn't want to be caught in rain with any vintage watch, independent of its depth rating. So it's about a certain um, technical achievement on one level that shows the kind of R&D and legacy behind the brands. And for Blancpain, you expect more. On the other hand, it's also about a certain peace of mind when you are wearing a true dyed-in-the-wool sports watch in the real world, right? You want you want that sort of peace of mind. The next watch that I want to talk about is by a brand that I'm not entirely familiar with. I've never seen one of their watches in the wild, or never really had the chance to examine. But whenever I heard about them, I was actually quite intrigued by the idea, by the aesthetic, so to speak, because the notion is that they are an independent brand that makes watches with a vintage aesthetic, but the watches they make, even though they are heavily inspired by vintage aesthetics, are vintage watches that have never been, right? For example, in the backbone of their Air collection, which is indeed their new release, is what they call here Type 10, Type 10 Classic specifically, which is basically an imaginary pilot's watch from mid-century. And here what it imagines is a supposed predecessor to the Type 20 chronographs that we are more familiar with. And you can already see the traces of that DNA, right? You have a largely black dial as the backdrop, oversized Arabic numerals that have this Fortina kind of look, a rotational, fully graduated, a rotational timing bezel that's fully graduated to 60 minutes, and a 2-register chronograph look, again with a relatively unusual placement of the subdials at 5 and 7, where you have the continuous running seconds at 5 and the 30-minute totalizer at 7. A very nice black textured dial that, again, I think sets this watch apart, even if the oversized Arabic numerals with this Fortina might play into that vintage vibe. I think the rather unusual dial saves the watch from belonging to that rather tired, I have to say, aesthetics of design that has given us by now too many vintage inspired divers, chronographs, field watches, so on and so forth, right? You know, we don't need another small brand making yet another copy of the Type 20 chronograph, whether they carry that name that belongs to the era or not, whether it's a brand that has always been active or one that has been recently resurrected. We really don't need one more of those pieces. The dimensions of the watch on paper are very good too. Again, loyal to the aesthetics of that time, which would be oversized in this case. For the time, 39 millimeters in diameter, 11.6 millimeters in thickness. I think really 12 millimeters when you figure in the domed crystal. apparently the lug to lug length is 47.7, so it really wears bigger than a 39 millimeters watch. The numerals and indices are actually rendered in superluminova, so they all glow. And there is a kind of porthole between 12 o'clock and the logo of the brand Albeson. And it turns to red when the chronograph is in operation. When it stopped, that turns to white, right, in an accent that matches the hand. So this would be when the chronograph is in operation. The red dots right there. And the chronograph pushers are also unique, again, which breaks both in terms of a certain balance of the design and the kinds of pieces, parts that we are used with. There is a red pusher which engages, I believe, the chronograph. And the pusher at roughly 10:30, I think, resets. I do need to double check on that. Speaking of water resistance, this watch, for example, with a closed case back, has 100 meters of water resistance, which, again, that's good sports watch territory, right? You wouldn't want to really submerge yourself in water in either case for a chronograph watch, simply because there's just more places on the case that can be compromised. But sorry, actually the red slide pusher is a mono pusher, so this is a single button chronograph, and that at 10 o'clock is actually simply the crown, right? That makes sense. That's much more obvious than what I was thinking. And this watch is priced at 4,000 Swiss francs, more or less 39.50, where VAT is excluded, taxes are excluded. So your rate would be that added to that, and the addition of probably customs and taxes. The architecture of the movement, which is hand wound, cost certified, beating at 4 hertz with a 65-hour power reserve, is very much based on a classic Valjoux 7750, but of course it is quite modified, right? When you see the positioning of the subdials, as well as has the crown, so on and so forth. So it's very different. It's thin. It has a nice luminous signature as well. Let's see if we have a visual of that right here. See the texture of the dial here. Again, this indicator at 12 o'clock is white when the chronograph is not engaged and red when it is. And again, the piece, I think, is quite interesting because on the one hand, the vintage inspiration is quite clear, but there are so many design elements that imbue the watch with its originality. Of course, the pusher itself is one thing. I think the concave bezel for the 60-minute timing is again fantastic. The case design with the angular lugs is beautiful. So you have a brand here. Again, I have not seen the watches in person, so I can't prefer my final judgment. But from a design standpoint, I'm really impressed because once again, we have enough brands that simply reiterate designs from the past to make a quick buck without displaying any form of originality, any new ideas. So when you have a brand like this that is clearly inspired by a vintage aesthetic, but is also determined to bring something new to the table, it's admirable. Already A4 effort for that reason. The next watch I want to talk about, the next release, is the new Lange Zeitwerk datum, the Zeitwerk date. It's not an entirely new watch, to be fair. It's really the same thing in a new metal. Zeitwerk is, of course, aesthetically the brand's most recognizable and one might say unique watch. But of course, it is much more than just an aesthetic. The Zeitwerk is an analog watch with a fully digital display with jumping hours and minutes, which from a technical perspective is quite power hungry. So it's quite admirable for all the watches in this line now, since the new generation has been inaugurated in 2019, have that full 72-hour power reserve that Lange has otherwise across the board. This particular model was previously available in white gold, and is now presented in pink gold. And the Zeitwerk date obviously also has a precise jumping date on the periphery of the dial, which has all the 31 days with the current date indicated in red. Again, you have this unusual placement of the crown at the traditional 2 o'clock position. You have the 2 pushers for the quick adjustment of the date and the hour. And again, for all it delivers in this package, this is actually a rather wearable watch, right? It's yes, it's 44 millimeters in diameter, but the thickness is only 12.3. So given the complication, it's actually quite beautiful. Again, that time bridge display is the centerpiece of the watch, and even though elements of this aesthetic are used throughout Lange's horological designs, from the big date or outsize date display of the Lange 1 to the day date display of the Odysseus, this perhaps is the watch that's most aesthetically adjacent to that famous 5-minute clock that adorns the stage in Dresden's Semperoper, right, which was initially designed and made by Lange's own ancestors. Here you have a gray dial that is fashioned from sterling silver. And of course, you have a movement where the bridges, in the traditional way of Saxonian watchmaking, are rendered in German silver, which is a particular alloy of nickel, copper, and zinc, and which naturally has this yellowish hue, but it also, again, with the passing of time, it tends to pick up some patina of its own. So as your watch ages, the bridges of that movement will also take on a champagne-like tint, which is very, very pleasant. An important aspect of the piece is the remontoire, which here ensures that the appropriate amount of power is released every 60 seconds to jump the discs for the minutes, right, which are already jumping. It's a slow beating caliber at 18,000 semi-oscillations per hour, which is 2.5 hertz in other words. Very nice finishing, plenty of decorative flourishes on this largely German silver movement by hand, the Glashütte ribbing on the bridges, or the Glashütte stripes, you might say, anglage on the edges, perlage for the movement base plate, so on and so forth. And of course, part of the brand's decorative flourish is the hand engraved balance conch, and here the escapement bridge as well. Lange is one of those makers that irritatingly has a lot of its models as price on request. I think that's what it says for the Zeitwerk date in pink gold as well. I believe the white gold one, even though that also says price on request on the page, should list around 130, roughly 130,000 in US dollars. I like the pink gold better. I think the Zeitwerk, Lange's design aesthetic is already quite stately, Teutonic, as one calls it appropriately. I think there's something about the pink gold that brings more out of that gray silver dial. A little bit more warmth. The Zeitwerk date in white gold is a little too monochromatic for my taste. But again, I think they both look quite nice. All right, well, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. Although I have to say, again, for a channel that's independent like mine, that doesn't have any sponsors, that doesn't have any sort of capital or mastermind behind it, it's a one-man operation completely with the sweat of my brow. And you can see it's a very glorious brow indeed, a single one, and purely driven by my knowledge, my resources, my insights, my work. I can only do so much for free. So on days like this, I'm more motivated to end the stream earlier, sooner than later. And I do apologize for that, but that's how things work. I think the more I give for free, the less I receive. I'm sorry if that sounds a certain way to you, if that makes you feel a certain way. I honestly couldn't care less. I think I deserve more. I think obviously I deserve more in every way, but certainly in terms of support as well. And YouTube provides you plenty of options for that. And certainly there are other ways in which you can support me and this channel and my platforms in general, which includes Instagram. And I provide the links for that in the description. If nothing else, I always appreciate if you chime in the chat, if you contribute, if you ask questions, if you jump on the panel to talk watches with me. But in the absence of all that, hey, my patience can only take me so far. So this is going to be it for the day. I do appreciate your spectatorship in and of itself. Follow me on Instagram. Feel free to share the link with other watch enthusiasts, other collectors. That, of course, helps. Every bit helps. Even leaving a comment after the live stream ends helps. Even, again, making sure that you are subscribed, making sure that you hit the like button every time you see one of my videos. That helps too. But feel free to follow me on Instagram as well, and leave comments always. I love hearing from you. I love getting those sorts of questions and requests even. And to the best of my ability, again, I try to respond and respond to your specific requests. So feel free to communicate that, whether it's with a comment for this video or with a direct message on Instagram. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Goodbye.